Crossing Church, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? What an awesome weekend we had last weekend. That was just incredible. I was hoping that I had this crazy idea that we might have 7,000 people at all the crossing locations. You guys just blew that away. We had 8,052. Couldn't believe it. And you know, normally we have somewhere between 4,500 and 5,000 people, and so that's like 3,000 people that we had opportunity to share the gospel message of Jesus with. Maybe some of you that are here today or at some of our locations today, this is your second week, or this is your third or fourth week, and you're just kind of trying it on. And every single campus of the crossing set a record, every single one of them. And it was just awesome. Kirksville, he had 11 baptisms on Easter. I just go on and on. Just so many victories, and just so thankful for how God's working. And you know, for some of you that this might be like your first or second or third week at the crossing, it might be a little bit crazy for you. You may have not have had this component in your life. You may never have really pursued a personal relationship with Jesus and knew that was available. And so this is really new ground. And so it's major change in your life. And maybe some of you kind of had a religion before, like you did something from a religious perspective, but really never took it to the relationship stage in your life. And so that's a big change. And change is not easy. How many of you struggle sometimes with change? I want to see hands. Do you struggle with change? Boy, I do. Like right now, I'm struggling with change. Okay, right at this very moment, because I have my shirt tail out. And I do. I have my shirt tail out. And you know, I used to get a beating from my mother if I had my shirt tail out, you know. She wouldn't let me go out of the house unless my shirt was tucked in. Tuck in that shirt. I don't know about you, but I'm old enough that that was kind of the rule. The rule was to have your shirt tucked in. You do that long enough in life, and that's normal for you, and so something isn't right. Something doesn't feel right when my shirt's untucked. And so, like, I've tried this a couple of times because I know that I am way outside the cool factor, okay? When my shirt's tucked in, I know I'm not cool. I know I'm not up to date. I know I'm showing my age. But every time I've tried it, I don't know if my mom is just beating me up in my past or what. I couldn't do it. And then I watched this movie, Larry Crown. Have you seen that movie? If you haven't seen Larry Crown, it's with Tom Hanks and Julia Roberts. He starts out like me, you know. He tucks in his golf shirts, and someone like changes him up, and he kind of goes through this metamorphosis in the movie. And it was funny because the next day I've got my shirt tail out. And my daughter looks at me and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I go, "I watched Larry Crown and ruined my life." Anyway, I'm going through change right now too. That might be a dumb one. You might look at that and go, "That's really kind of silly," and that's okay, because if you're going through the change of understanding a relationship with Christ and the intimacy of that relationship, that's not silly. It may not be easy, but it's really, really worth it. And I'm glad you're here, because this series that we're going to be in right now called Not a Fan is absolutely critical to you understanding what we mean when we say we want you to have an intimate personal relationship with Jesus Christ. I want you to capture what that means. Not to be a fan, but to be a follower. This is all from a book by a guy named Kyle Idleman, good friends with his dad. As a matter of fact, the reason that I'm at the crossing is because of Kyle Idleman's dad, Ken Idleman, who was my Bible college president, and his in-laws were charter members of this church back in 1974. And in 1998, he said, "Jerry, I want you to go check out this church." And I'm here because of that. It's his son that wrote the book, Not a Fan. And it's a book that's really kind of taken the country by storm. And this series is based off that book. It's got some great points in it. So I want you to know where this is all coming from. And Nathan Rector, who used to be our discipleship pastor here, just preached through this series and talked about how great it was. And so, and right now he's going through 50 days, which is pretty cool. So, I mean, it's just neat to see how our churches are working together. But I really want you to key in, lock in on this idea of being a follower of Jesus Christ and not just a fan. We all know what fans are like. I'm not a particularly good one. But there are people at the crossing that are. Some of you are downright insane. You're like nuts. If I would say something anti-Cubs or anti-Cardinals right now, some of you would be really, like, legitimately angry. If you get legitimately angry over stuff like that, you're a fan. There are people who go out in sub-zero weather and paint their chest with one letter and stand with the other guys with their shirts off who paint their chest with another letter so that they can support their team. There are people that go crazy over being a fan. I mean, buy stuff, endure stuff, ridiculous stuff because they're so dedicated to their team. And you know, I understand that to a point. Like I said, I've never really been, if you said, Jerry, are you a Colts fan? I'd say, yeah, but not the real deal. And you know what I'm talking about when I talk about the real deal. Cubs fans, 100% you're the real deal. If you're a Cubs fan, you're the real deal. You can't be a Cubs fan unless you're a real deal. Isn't that right? I mean, you cannot be a fair weather Cubs fan because they have a lot of foul weather. And it's hard, you know, they've had a lot of heartbreak, but some of you are like die-hard Cubs fans. And so you are what I'm talking about, you know. I'm one of those guys that if the team's winning, I start watching. And when the team doesn't win, maybe I'm not going to be as faithful as a follower because I'm not really a great fan. But some of you are great fans. Well, I think some people are great fans when it comes to church and a relationship with Jesus Christ. You know what I'm saying? That they are like, this is the awesomest thing. I mean, it's like, I love going to this church. I go to this church, I just get so pumped. I get excited, man. I mean, it's like, wow. You walk in there and, woo, you know, it's just, you can just feel it. It's just, wow, there's this, I don't know what it is, but it's just great. And then you go outside and you cuss the person that pulls in front of you in the parking lot. You're a fan. That's what that is. You're a person who really gets all into the experience of being part of a body of believers, but you're really not living it out personally in your life. I mean, it's good when you're there. It's good when you're in it. But when you're out of it, it's like, well, now I'm out of it. Now I'm in a different world. That's kind of what being a fan is. And for a lot of us, I think, and for a lot of churches today, they're more like stadiums than they are sanctuaries. You know what I mean? Like when we're there, we're just busting at this inside because we're just so excited about what's going on. It feels so great, but it doesn't last because whatever's happening on the weekend isn't being reproduced moment by moment or daily. And so we see things like what happens on Easter, a lot of people showing up and a lot of people excited, but is it just for that moment? I mean, I can go, that's awesome that we had this big number, but what's actually happening now after Easter? What's happening now, day after day and week after week? That's what I want to explore together. Where do you land? Are you a fan when it comes to Jesus or a follower? We have to figure that one out. And in order to do that, we're going to have a DTR. How many of you know what that is? Raise your hand if you know, all of our locations, what a DTR is. There's about 9 of you that are raising your hands. DTR stands for Define the Relationship. Define the relationship. I guarantee you, if you've ever been in a relationship with someone, this has happened to you. I can remember this happening in my relationship with Allison. It wasn't very far into the relationship. Allison looked at me, and she was the one who said it to me. She goes, Jerry, I love you. I went, whoa. Boom. You didn't, You're not using that word with me. Because I was raised that when you use that word, when you use the L word, like, that's it, you know? And I didn't want to hear that word. So we ended up having this long talk. It was really me that said, before we go any further, if you're going to use that word with me, let me help you to understand what I mean when I say that. So I took all the joy out of that moment. Because there's only one response. When a person says, I love you, there's only one response. And if you don't give that response, then you're going to have a DTR, right? Now, I think I'm the exception to the rule. I think guys generally want to avoid the DTR. I think girls usually are a lot more into that conversation than guys are. I think most guys run from it. I didn't run from it. I mean, I wanted to know what that is. But regardless, I think you know what I'm talking about. And you have this hard conversation where you say, okay, well, let's figure out where we are. Let's define the relationship. Are we just friends? Are you thinking that you can just be a friend and have certain benefits? Are you saying that I'm the one? Are you saying, what's going on here? And you know what? We're still doing it. We're still doing it. In our music, we're still doing it. Something about put a ring on it. I think that there was a song about that a little while. Let's define the relationship. So when it comes to Christ, and when it comes to the idea of fan or follower, I think that Jesus is going to take us to a place where we have to define the relationship. And he's going to have that hard conversation with you. And he's going to have that hard conversation with me. Now, it may not be an easy conversation. But the nice thing about having a DTR is when you get on the other side of it, you have a great deal of clarity. Right? It's not comfortable to be in a relationship where you really don't know where it's going. Wouldn't be comfortable for you, and it wouldn't be comfortable for the person that you're in the relationship with. You need to have those. And that's where relationships either stop or continue. Isn't that right? Like, you'll get to a certain point in the relationship, you'll have this define the relationship talk, and either you're going to break up or you're going to go to the next level of that relationship. And I think that's what happens with us and Jesus. We may be fans right now. Some of us may think we're followers, but in reality, what we are just fans. And what Jesus wants us to do is to have that talk with him and figure out, what are we really? Now, there's a great story in the Bible that shows us an illustration of this DTR, this define the relationship. And it's in John, the 3rd chapter. It's the whole 3rd chapter. It's about Nicodemus. I'm going to read verses 1 through 7 of John 3. Now, let me tell you who Nicodemus is. He's a Jewish religious leader, a Pharisee, and Jesus is this itinerant preacher, a rabbi, and the Pharisees really don't like Jesus. They don't like what he's saying. He's stirring up a lot of turmoil, but Nicodemus has heard what he said, and it's kind of connecting with his heart. And he's trying to figure out, whose side am I going to be on? Am I going to follow Jesus? Because I'm kind of a fan. I like what he's saying. I like what I'm hearing. It's exciting to me. It's stirring my heart. But do I really want to become a follower? Because if I do, it's going to cost me. Because these other people that I'm in alignment with, these other people that I'm kind of living my life with, the rest of these Jewish religious leaders, they don't like him. So I don't know what I need to do here. So he goes to him and he has this conversation. Now let's read it together. Verse 1, starting in verse 1 of John 3, it says, Now there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. And this man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know you've come from God as a teacher, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him. Jesus answered and said to him, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Nicodemus said to him, How can a man be born when he's old? He cannot enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born, can he? Jesus answered, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which was born of spirit is spirit. Do not be amazed that I said to you, you must be born again. Nicodemus is an enthusiastic admirer, like so many of us. And he comes to Jesus, and Jesus is basically saying, you have got to start over. Isn't that really what he's saying? You have to be born again. If that isn't a picture of starting over, I don't know what is. So what does that mean? What does it mean to have to start over? Let's take this idea of a define the relationship talk and break it down into three components that Jesus is challenging Nicodemus with, and challenges all that listen to him with, and is challenging you and me with today. Here's the first one. Why are you here? Why are you here? So Nicodemus comes to Jesus and he's kind of schmoozing with him. Did you hear the beginning? You know, we know that you do these miracles, and we know that you're this, and we know what you're that, that you're that. So he's kind of like leaning into Jesus. But really, is that what it's about? It's not just trying to make nice with Jesus. He wants to know. He wants to know who Jesus really is. And Jesus comes right back at him with such a bold statement that it forces Nicodemus to internally ask this question: why am I here? And maybe it needs to be asked in your heart: why are you here? Why are you here right now? If you're standing before the Lord Jesus, why are you here? Jesus draws a line in the sand. And it's interesting, when Jesus speaks to people, when it begins, he's very attractive. They said, where are you going, teacher? And he goes, come and see. He starts to preach, and all of these crowds come to him. He heals people, and it's very attractive. But after you're drawn to Jesus, there comes this moment when the relationship is defined between you and him. And you're going to have to understand and answer why you're here. If you go over a couple of pages to the 6th chapter of John, starting in verse 2, this is when, after Jesus has fed the 5,000, it says in verse 2, a large crowd followed him because they saw the signs which he was performing to those who were sick. You know the story, right? Is that they followed Jesus. He wanted to go the other side of the lake and have some time alone with his disciples. And everybody followed him over there. And when they followed him over, you know what he did? They got hungry, got late. There was a little kid. He had 5 loaves and 2 small fish. And Jesus blessed the 5 loaves and 2 fish. And 5,000 men, plus women and children, maybe 20,000 people, had their fill of loaves and fishes. Right? He fed them all. So then they followed Jesus all the way back around. Jesus gets there a different way. We're not going to go into that today. But when they get there, they're saying, okay, I can see what you're doing, what you were able to do with fish and chips. Hey, how are you with eggs and hash browns? We got this guy and he's got some eggs and hash browns. How about you multiply that? Why are you here? These people who called themselves disciples, why were they there? Were they really disciples? Were they followers of Jesus? They're called disciples, or were they just fans? That's the question. The question gets answered because Jesus preaches a sermon called the Bread of Life. And the Bread of Life sermon, let me tell you, is one difficult sermon to hear. Jesus says he's the bread of life. He says things like this: unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you. But if you eat my flesh and drink my blood, I will raise you up on the last day. And people are like going, what? And it isn't just what. It's like, I can't follow that. Why are you here? Why are you here? What do you think I am? Are you just here for another meal? What's the response? The response in John 6, verse 66 is this. When he's done with the sermon, it says, as a result of this, many of his disciples withdrew and were not walking with him anymore. They quit following him. And you notice what Jesus didn't do? He didn't chase them. Because the relationship had been defined. So let me ask you, everybody at all of our locations, why are you here? Are you here to be a fan? Are you here to enjoy this hour together? Or do you have an intention to be in a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? Fan or follower? Second question, are you all in? You know that's kind of how it goes with relationships and defining the relationship questions, right? The next question is usually, are you all in? Are we going to be committed in this relationship? Is this an exclusive relationship? Is this relationship going to end in marriage? Is this till death do us part? What are we doing here? Are you all in? You know, it's amazing how we who claim to be Christians can compartmentalize our Christianity. You know what I mean by that? Maybe a better word would be to customize our Christianity, to make it fit us. Like we have all these areas of our lives that we really don't want God to be the Lord of. We really don't want Jesus to be involved with or invited into. But there are these other areas of our lives that we're just fine with him being in. So we want to create a customized, compartmentalized Christianity where we're going, Jesus, I really love the whole idea of you forgiving me, but I really don't want to forgive all of those people. So I'm willing to let you in to this part of my life, but not this part of my life. You know, Jesus, I'm really into you taking the ability that I have, but stay out of my checkbook. Hey, Jesus, you know, I know what you're telling me about living a holy life, but don't ask about my, sexual desires or sexual preferences. Don't get into that world with me. We want to customize our Christianity. I got to ask you this question. Is a customized Christianity really Christianity at all? Is it really? In Luke 9:23, you know what Jesus said? If anyone would come after me, let him, what? Deny himself, take up his cross every day, and follow me. What's he saying? Are you all in? Why are you here? Are you all in? Because that's what it looks like. Third question is this. Have you made this faith your own? Or is it somebody else's? Now, I have to say, honestly, growing up in a Christian home, it really wasn't my faith. It was mom and dad's. They had this faith before me. I watched them live it out. It wasn't a matter of choice as to whether or not I went with them to church or was involved. If I was in their family, ate at their dinner table, was clothed by their dollars, I was going to church with them. There wasn't any ands, ifs, or buts about that. That's just how it was. But there came a time in my life. For me, it came with a driver's license. Whether or not I was going to go. And it was going to become my own faith or it was still their faith. And I have to tell you, even though I grew up in that concept, there was a time there, I would say between 16 and 20, where I was really kind of in and out and up and down and right and left. And I was, and I think that's probably the truth with a lot of us. Some of you didn't have a relationship with a mom and dad. Maybe you, neither one of you, maybe you never even got into a relationship with Christ until you got married. And maybe it wasn't yours, it was your spouse's. And your spouse was all in, but you weren't all in. But you thought, I gotta take care of this marriage, I gotta take care of this relationship, so I'll step in even though it's really not my faith. And so you're kind of living out your faith through your spouse. Maybe you're here because of your kids. I just want good examples set for my kids. And so I'll go to church, be a part. Is it really your own? Or is it somebody else's? Is it a faith that you claim as your own, but really don't live it as your own? This is what I mean. Is your belief divorced from your lifestyle? I see that a lot today. I see it in my own life sometimes. That my beliefs, and I may hold those beliefs really strong. I may really hey, this is how it is. But my lifestyle doesn't reflect what I'm saying. What's coming out of my mouth is not the same as how I'm living my life. And so do we have that kind of a faith that's it's here today and it's not there the next day? Let me ask you a question. If you saw me on a Friday night and I was in a restaurant with another girl, not my wife, sitting next to her, and we were holding hands and stuff like that, and it was like, you could tell it was a romantic thing. Would you have a problem with that? Yeah, probably would. Not as bad as the problem I would have with that, let me tell you. But anyway, if you saw something like that and you were really bold, if you were really, really bold and came up to me and go, what is this? What if I were to say to you something like this? Hey, it's just Friday night. I'll be 100% committed to my wife this weekend. Hey, when you see me on Saturday night or Sunday and I'm preaching, let me tell you, this isn't serious. This really doesn't mean anything. Would you go, oh, okay. Okay, that's fine. How many of you be fine? Don't even raise your hand because I don't even want to know it. Because I would be a dead man, all right? And I'm fine with that. No, I'd be worse than a dead man. It wouldn't be all right. Because you know what that relationship is supposed to look like. But sometimes in our relationship with Jesus, it isn't looking like it's supposed to look like. And then these other times, we're running off with somebody else when we're supposed to be in this relationship with Jesus, and we have supposed to have made this faith our own, and we're supposed to be all in, and we're supposed to have answered the question, why are we here? The relationship is defined. It's like Jesus asking his apostles, who do people say that I am? But he doesn't stop there. He goes to Simon Peter. He looks him right in the eye, and he goes, who do you say that I am? That's defining the relationship. Man, how many of you, are some of you golf fans? Yeah, I bet you are. And you saw Bubba Watson win the Masters, which was really cool. One of the things about Bubba Watson that's really cool is he's a guy that lives his Christianity right out in front of him. And there's a lot of, and he tweets regularly. As a matter of fact, on his list of the 5 most important things in life, guess which one is number 5? Golf. His relationship with God through Jesus Christ is number 1. That's pretty cool. And he has this tweet ministry where he tweets and people, and he's having relationships with people and trying to use golf as a platform to share his faith with other people. It's really pretty awesome. But there's a lot of people really don't like that. Just stick to golf, man. I don't want to get the whole, your whole religion thing. But he can't because it's that key in his life. Is Jesus confused about who you say you are versus who you really are? That's my question. So, Jesus has this conversation with Nicodemus. And in that conversation, what Jesus is trying to do is define the relationship with Nicodemus. What happens? After Nicodemus leaves that conversation, what happens later? You get a little indication about that in the Bible. It's in John chapter 7, in verse 51. A little later, Jesus keeps stirring everybody up, these Jewish religious leaders, and guess who stands up for Jesus in that crowd of people that don't like what he's doing? Nicodemus. Listen to what he says in verse 51 of John 7. Our law does not judge a man unless it first hears from him and knows what he's doing, does it? In other words, you guys don't have a right to judge Jesus unless you bring him in here and ask him questions. He's defending Jesus in front of his peers. Listen to the very next line. And they answered him, "You are not also from Galilee, are you?" So what are they saying to Nicodemus? Are you with him or are you with us? Are you one of those dumb people from up north? Or are you with us, the educated, intellectual, spiritual elite of Jerusalem? Wow. Now Nicodemus is having to be labeled, isn't he? Am I going to be a Jewish religious leader or am I going to be a Christ follower? How about you? You see that the relationship is starting to get defined. Now I want us to look at one more verse before we leave the scriptures, and it's in the book of John, chapter 19, verse 39. Jesus has died on the cross for the sins of the whole world. He's paid for those sins, and he's in the process of being buried. Now the rest of the apostles are AWOL. Okay, they're gone, except for one, John. John's the only guy that was of the apostles that stuck around. But there were also 2 Jewish religious leaders that were there. And one is a guy named Joseph of Arimathea. And it was his tomb that was used to put Jesus in. And it says that in verse 38. But when you get to verse 39, look what it says. Nicodemus, who had first come to him, Jesus, by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds weight. Now, Nicodemus doesn't care. He doesn't care if people label him as a Christ follower, because in the full daylight, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he goes along with Joseph of Arimathea to ask for Jesus' body, and then he's the one who gets all of the spices together, carries 100 pounds of spices. Now, you can't hardly do that in secret, right? You can't put that under your robes so that they can give Jesus a proper burial. He has lost his religion, but he has found a Savior. That's what I want you to hear today. I want you to hear this from me today, because God is not going to be content with you being a fan of his. Jesus is not going to be content with you going, "Yay, Jesus died for my sins, buried, rose from the dead," big J on your chest, whoo, out in the cold. He's not going to be content with that. He wants to define a relationship with you. Are you going to follow me? Because it's going to cost you everything, right? If you're going to follow Jesus, then he's going to have an expectation that you're all in. If you're going to follow Jesus, he wants you to make this faith your own. It's not about your parents or your grandparents or some religious legacy that you have in your family. It's about what are you doing with him right now. Too many of us want an OxyClean Jesus. You know what I mean? We want a Billy Mays Jesus. Woo, check this out. Wow. You just apply a little bit of Jesus to your life and you're all clean. That's what I want. I want an OxyClean Jesus. I want to do the minimum and I want to receive the maximum. No. Jesus is going, no, it isn't like that. We have to define the relationship, and if you want to be called a child of mine, a follower of mine, then that's what you have to do. You have to follow. What are you going to do? Fan or follower? We're moving to a time of decision.